This is Facebook explicitly deciding we are going to allow scams on our platform.
They were doing $3.5 billion every 6 months in what they referred to as higher legal risk scam revenue.
We do need to cover the FT story about NEOM.
It's like if you asked a 14-year-old who was a sci-fi fan to imagine a city of the future, who had no understanding of structural engineering, no concept of scale, and just came up with all the craziest shit they could think of, this is what you would end up with.
The Trump administration famously invoked the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to impose tariffs on literally the whole world, including penguins.
Hello, and welcome to Slate Money, your guide to the business and finance news of the week. I'm Felix Salmon of Bloomberg. I'm here with Emily Peck of Axios.
Hello, hello.
I'm here with Elizabeth Spiers of the New York Times.
Hello.
And most excitingly, I am here with Jeff Horwitz of Reuters.
Hello. I'm Jeff Horwitz. I'm a technology reporter at Reuters. I cover Meta a good deal.
And you have a fabulous scoop this week about scams on the platform, especially on Facebook. So we're going to talk about that. We are going to talk about the crazy amount of money that MBS in Saudi Arabia has spent on this folly called NEOM. Of course, we're going to talk about tariffs and the big Supreme Court case. That's coming up right now. We have a Slate Plus segment about Christmas shopping. It's an exciting one this week, so stay tuned on Slate Money. Okay, Emily, I want to talk to you, if I may, about the Trump tariff case that went up in the Supreme Court this week, and the kind of fun, interesting, weird thing was the way in which the Solicitor General was backpedaling wildly on the whole question of whether these tariffs raise revenue and whether that revenue is important or meaningful.
Yes. So this is the case. I think we've talked about it before. The Trump administration famously invoked the IEEPA Act, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, to impose tariffs on literally the whole world, including penguins, in April. And no big businesses filed lawsuits, even though they were upset about it. Some small businesses filed lawsuits, and now and the Trump administration lost at the two courts below the Supreme Court, which really honed in on the idea that there wasn't really an emergency here. The Trump administration was saying the trade deficit is the emergency, but we've had these trade deficits for a very long time. It's not really an emergency.
Not to mention the fact that we're imposing tariffs even on countries with which we don't have a trade deficit.
Yes, good point. And so at the Supreme Court, though, they also honed in on a very relevant thing, which is that in the Constitution, Congress is the one who does the taxing and the revenue raising, not the president. And the president, Trump is his name, he has been bragging about the revenue raised by the tariffs for months and months and months. I think in one post he says they're bringing in trillions of dollars, which is not accurate.
Scott Bessent has been coming out saying, like, we can raise $500 billion a year in tariffs. And, like, he has suddenly been like, wait, was I not meant to say that?
Yeah. And they've even said, like, we can lower income taxes because we're making so much money from the tariffs, et cetera.
Yeah, do you remember during the Big Beautiful Bill Act, they got really upset that the CBO wasn't including tariff revenue? They're like, you have to include the tariff revenue.
Include the tariff revenue. But at the Supreme Court, John Sauer, the Solicitor General, argued tariffs really aren't about money. They're not about raising revenue. They're not a revenue raising mechanism at all. They're about regulation. And that was the argument they put forward. So they sort of have their rhetoric going into this case has really it's been sort of a self-own in many ways.
It's sort of like Sauer's entire argument is he's defending a serial killer and saying, my client didn't do it, but the serial killer is posting on social media every day, I did it, here's where the body is.
But it's okay because that's not like evidence in front of the Supreme. I mean, I always wonder the degree to which the Supreme Court cares about like what people say and what people do, and the degree to which they just kind of sit there looking at the Constitution and scratching their chin and going, I wonder what the Constitution says.
Well, we know in the past they haven't cared about President Trump's rhetoric, right? In the Muslim ban case, the so-called Muslim ban case in 2018, when Trump was going around saying, we need a Muslim ban, and they said, it doesn't matter what he's saying, like, we're just going to look at the policy. So in the past, they have ignored things he said.
Here, though, it's a little bit more, I think, relevant because they are looking at the question of intent. And so when he articulates what his intent is, it's more directly relevant than it would have been in the, Muslim ban.
We don't know. We don't know whether they're looking at the question of intent, but it would be perfectly rational for them to look at the question
Well, we
of
do
intent.
because they've literally articulated that. Some of the justices.
Gorsuch seems to be the one who's like focused the most on this sort of question, because he's like, if you look at the original ruling from the International Trade Court in New York, it was very long and very detailed and very persuasive, and it basically said these tariffs are illegal on a whole bunch of different levels, and therefore, we're overturning them. But the one thing it didn't do was go into the nitty-gritty of, are they constitutional? They didn't really talk much about the separation of powers and like only Congress can impose taxes and that kind of like high-minded stuff. And that seems to be what the Supreme Court seems to be focusing on, which is kind of interesting because like as per the lower courts, they don't need to. Like these tariffs are pretty clearly illegal, high-minded constitutional questions notwithstanding.
Yeah, they could pick their poison in terms of arguments, I think. There's also this major questions doctrine that basically holds the executive branch can't really do anything if it raises major questions. So they used it to knock down a bunch of Biden things that they said were like a really big deal, and Congress needs to weigh in when there's so much money at stake. But the Biden things that they were weighing in on, like the student loan forgiveness, we're talking like billions of dollars. In this case, it's trillions. So you would think if there was any consistency to this doctrine that they came up with, they could also use that to knock back the tariffs. I do think the maybe more interesting question longer term is like, the White House is probably just going to do tariffs some other way, because there are lots of legal ways the president can impose tariffs without Congress.
These tariffs that fall under this court case are roughly half. I think someone was estimating that like we're getting about $190 billion of tariff revenue right now, and that would go down to like $100 billion if all of the ones that are about to be made illegal are made illegal. But that still leaves the other half, and then what you can do is like expand the other half. I think it would be much, much harder to just say, oh yeah, Brazil, 50% tariffs because I don't like your politics. Or Switzerland, 39% tariffs because reasons. I think those kind of very sweeping, non-targeted tariffs, which are just based on countries rather than national security or anything like that, would be harder. But, you're absolutely right that it's not like the Trump tariffs in entirety would suddenly disappear in the puff of smoke.
Well, I love in one of the stories we read in the prep, it was a journal story. Trump's complaining that if this happens, it will, quote, literally destroy the United States of America. And then the journal very dryly says, that doesn't seem likely.
Jeff, you are hanging out in California in the world of like blockchain and prediction markets. Right now, the prediction markets are saying that there's like a 70% chance that the Supreme Court will uphold the lower courts and that the tariffs will be found to be illegal. How's the vibe over where you are?
No, it was fascinating watching the real-time odds change as justices continued to speak and ask questions. Like there were like spikes, which is I guess the entertainment value of prediction markets. Really, we haven't fully appreciated.
I love this idea that people have been trying to get television cameras into the Supreme Court for a long time and failing, and so it's been kind of boring as a spectator sport. But now that you can put money on it and bet it in real time, then suddenly people are going to start caring about SCOTUS.
Yeah, no, it's prediction markets have managed to do that, and I mean, it'll be the same for Pee-wee soccer games and Pee-wee baseball pretty soon. We can bet on the children. It'll be great.
It will be interesting to see if the prediction, if it's correct that the Supreme Court's going to overturn these tariffs, because the prediction markets they've been really great, really in predicting things so far, right? But this is the first one I remember involving Supreme Court argument, so that's kind of fun.
So Emily, what's your feeling? Do you think the prediction markets are right that we've finally reached the point at which this conservative Supreme Court is going to go against President Trump's wishes for pretty much the first time?
I mean, I'm not in the prediction game, so I'm not going to make a prediction. That said, I would say this court has ruled in the president's favor a lot, and I feel like if it doesn't this time, it'll find a very narrow way through to leave him lots of room to do lots of other things.
I was particular in the appeals court, which heard this case en banc, the entire suite of appeals judges weighed in. I was quite shocked at how incoherent the dissent was. It wasn't a unanimous decision. There was a dissent. There were 3 judges who managed to come up with a reason why the tariffs were legal. And I read that dissent 3 times, and I could not make head or tail of it. It just didn't make any sense.
Yeah, I tried to read that too. It was hard.
But it looks like the judgment will come down probably next month. We're hoping before the end of the year. And then comes the interesting question, which is, if the tariffs are ruled to be illegal, is the obvious remedy going to be put in place, which is that everyone who paid any of these tariffs can put in for a refund with the IRS?
I'm owed at least $15, I think. This does happen. So there are major questions at stake, important situations.
I mean, I hate to break this to you, Jeff, but you did not pay the tariffs. You just paid a higher price for something that was tariffed.
No,
the entity that paid the tariff was the importer.
I did have to pay UPS. So I am. If there is a problem here, I am a victim. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I think I had to pay some tariffs on a chair once. But yeah,
there you go.
Broadly speaking, it's the imports and or the importers, I should say, and that's every major company in America pretty much is importing things. And so, yeah, Elizabeth, you think they are all going to be that was illegal, I want my money back, and the Treasury is just going to have to start giving out massive refunds?
I think some of them are going to say that was illegal, I want my money back. I'm not optimistic that they will end up with refunds, though.
Why not?
I feel like the Trump administration will find a way around it. I mean, they seem to their MO so far is to say just declare things unilaterally that they want to do and then wait for somebody to stop them, either the courts or Congress. And we've had limited success in doing that.
Their math is interesting. I've been covering the SNAP case, the case over supplemental nutrition benefits that's sort of ping-ponging in the court right now. And the Trump White House put out this formula for states to calculate reduced food stamp benefits. And it's been interesting watching the math happen. They did one formula and then they had to take it back because it had an error in it. And then they put out another formula. Meanwhile, nothing's happening. It sort of reminds me of when the tariffs rolled out and they had that formula that they pulled from ChatGPT.
That insane formula that for what the tariff should be that made no sense at all.
Yeah, so you wonder if they have to issue refunds, how they're going to math that. It'll be really interesting to cover. I'll say that.
We should, since we have Jeff Horwitz here, we should definitely talk about, Jeff, your massive new investigatory piece. You are at Reuters, and basically, if I'm going to massively oversimplify here, and you're going to tell me it's not as easy as that, but Facebook, if I'm a scammer, I'm just Facebook, Facebook, Facebook. This is where the money is. Is that about right?
That was Facebook employees' conclusion, both on their own and also in sort of investigations of scammer forums. Because the scammers actually are pretty good. There's a community there. I was kind of surprised to figure that out along the way. These people there is a great deal of honor and community among these said thieves. But the company has a, shall we say, reasonably lenient set of guardrails for when they take you down for scamming as an advertiser. This is all probabilistic, but as an advertiser, if you're sub 95% scammer, you are unlikely to be actually stopped from buying ads on an ongoing basis.
So wait, this is well. So basically, if Facebook sets its like algorithms on you and says you are 90% probable to be a scam, then they'll be like, not only, this is my favorite bit, not only will they say we're not sure, so we'll let you stay and we'll let you keep on scamming, but also, and this is my absolutely favorite bit, they'll be like, but we'll charge you more.
Yeah, so there are penalty bids, right? So digital ads are very frequently sold in auctions. And that's how almost all of the advertising on Facebook and Meta's products are sold. And because of sort of very tight revenue constraints that Meta has placed on its own safety staff in terms of taking down scammers, they kind of went for a more revenue efficient way of doing this. And that is that, if you think someone is, say, 90% likely to be a scammer, you're going to charge them a penalty on their bid in the advertising market. So if Scammy Felix bids 120 and you've got a 25 cent penalty bid, then Honest Jeff here could come along, bid a buck, and still win. But the way that this would work out in practice is that if Scammy Felix is betting $1.30 is up to pay $1.30, and I bet my buck, you're still going to win. You're just going to pay an extra 25 cents, basically.
For the few scammers that do get kicked off the platform because they're more than 95% likely to be scams, Facebook loses some revenue there because it's no longer getting money from those people. But on the other hand, it's making money from all of the penalty bids that it's imposing on all of the other scammers. So really, scamming is now a profit center for them.
Well, also, if you're a successful scammer, that would seem to imply that they're going to sort of service you better. One of the most amazing stats in your story was just that small advertisers have to get reported at least 8 times before they get taken down. And then also the stats about user reports being either rejected or ignored 96% of the time are just mind-boggling.
They actually did. They considered the 96% failure rate in handling user reports of fraudulent messages to be a problem. And so they did set a higher standard for themselves going forward. And that higher standard was dismissing at most 75% of all valid user reports of scams. Which, to be fair, is a big improvement over dismissing 96% of valid user reports. Now they're just going to do 25%. So they're going to get 1 in 4 right. That's the bar that they set for themselves to clear.
And to be clear, it doesn't make running a platform that is scam infested does not seem to be the most obviously user friendly way of being a company. Is this just another piece of enshittification? Is this what happens when the revenue function just completely squashes the product function?
Look, I think for a number of years, social media has been perhaps less interesting to Mark Zuckerberg than other new technology, right?
He did change his name to Meta because the metaverse was going to be so big.
Is that the company was all in on the metaverse and that didn't work out, and previously it was kind of all in on crypto and for a bit, with Libra, and now it's all in on AI. And I mean, there is this just massive cash cow that continues to grow, day by day, that they've been using to pay for investments that have not worked out great.
So basically what you're saying is that if Mark Zuckerberg is wandering around Silicon Valley offering $100 million pay packages to AI scientists, which he is doing. And if that's what he cares about the most, which it is because he said so, then at that point, the social media stuff is just basically the way to pay for his investments in AI. And so the main job of social media is not to bring people together and let people talk about their aunt. It's to create a cash flow that can pay for AI. And so he's maximizing for cash flow. He's optimizing for cash flow.
Look, I have not seen a document where they are talking about how they're going to buy more NVIDIA chips by running more scams, right? It's not like that's a one-to-one, thing. That said, Mark has been very clear that he views one of Meta's big advantages in the AI race, so to speak, as that it has the cash flow from its business to invest like this, right? I mean, other companies in AI, they charge people for their products. Meta is giving away, this stuff for free, and that's been a tried and true tactic for them in the past. But
and to be clear, like the big thing that everyone is all talking about when it comes to OpenAI, which is still arguably the market leader in the AI space, is how the fuck are they going to be able to pay for all of these chips? And the CFO, Sarah Fryer, was coming out and saying, we're going to have to start doing profit share with pharma companies and, whatever, because they are desperate for cash to fund all of the massive capital investments that they need to buy chips and data centers and all the rest of it. And it's true that if you are Meta and you have just this raging torrential river of cash running through your headquarters every day, you don't have that problem, and that does give you a significant advantage.
It is. I mean, it's weird to see this stuff in internal documents play out with like the level of stinginess that it seems like they've shown in some instances, right? Like, so a team that was devoted to trying to basically create a bit of extra fiction and extra vetting for high-risk clients, high-risk advertising clients. They were given a cumulative total of revenue harm they could do to the company, and that included both benign and violating. So in other words, like scams and not scams. That cumulative total was 0.15% of Meta's revenue for the first half of this year, which is not, I mean, yes, it's north of $100 million, but I mean, it's a banana, Michael. How much could that cost? Right? It's for them.
The scammers are providing billions and billions of dollars of revenue to Meta, and the anti-scammer team is being told you can only cut no more than $100 million or $130 million or whatever.
Or so,
yeah. Then by definition, the overwhelming majority of scammers are just going to keep on staying on the platform.
Yeah, and this is one of the reasons why the penalty bids were, I think, popular internally, is that if you wanted to reduce scams but kind of to minimize the revenue impact, you didn't ever say no to anyone. You can't buy ads. I mean, you did for the people who were truly 100% nailed. But you mostly would just sort of raise the price and make buying scams less economic. And it does work. I mean, there are internally there were some ethical concerns raised about this because, as you noted, Felix, like you are charging scammers more because they are scammers, which is a weird thing to sort of bake into your your calculations.
It reminds me very much of the famous story, I think I've told this story on the show before, about the primary school that was getting really upset about parents who would turn up late to pick up their kids at the school gates. And so they decided to implement fines. And they're like, if you turn up more than 5 minutes late, we're going to fine you $20. And what happened is that the number of parents who turned up late at the school gates went up substantially because they were like, oh, now I've been permission. Now it's just something I can pay for. If I want to turn up late, I can just hand them $20 and that's okay. And it does kind of legitimize this whole like if you have a Pigovian tax, which is what this is, you tax things you want less of, then that is an alternative to some kind of regulatory ban, right? You're saying we are explicitly going to allow this and we're going to tax it rather than disallowing it. And it does seem like this is Facebook very explicitly deciding we are going to allow scams on our platform.
And there are other elements of the document that do support a similar conclusion, we'll say. So, for example, internally, they noted that they were doing $3.5 billion every 6 months in what they referred to as higher legal risk scam revenue. So that would be stuff where it's like pretty obvious something is wrong. Like not like, like that marketplace advertisement, the goods never arrived. Like we're talking like really that like, that one just doesn't look good on its face.
Like, would you like some heroin?
Yeah, well, that was actually an interesting thing is that it turns out a lot of the illegal drug advertising internally is actually fake. That's scam ads too. So they're scamming people out of like buying drugs on
Who's going to complain
Facebook.
about I didn't get my cocaine?
But it's hard. It's hard to.
Isn't this all in keeping with kind of Facebook's general orientation toward everything that might be unethical, which is we'll fix it if we're about to be regulated, but if we're not, we're gonna just punt on the problem.
That has been a historical approach that until something is either a very high-end PR fire or there's regulatory threats, the company has in the past sometimes been pretty tolerant of things. And I think that's with the scam revenue issue. One of the documents I've seen states they're doing $3.5 billion every 6 months in higher legal risk scam revenue, and that the outer limit of potential fines is likely less than that by a margin. And that then turns into a fairly basic math problem, and one in which cutting down too hard might have negative revenue effects.
Hey there! Before we get back to the show, I want to tell you about The Slatest, which is Slate's daily newsletter that lands in your inbox every evening. It's written by Slate's editor-in-chief, Hilary Fry, and it is the perfect way to end your day a little smarter than you began it. Every issue pulls together the sharpest stories, the most surprising news, and the can't-miss Slate podcasts, including this one, plus smart analysis and a bit of well-earned distraction. From DC to Hollywood to the algorithm, The Slatest keeps you clued in to the world and to Slate. You can sign up right now at slate.com/theslatest.
One thing I thought was really interesting in your piece, Jeff, was that Meta is more apt to crack down on scams if they involve like a big name brand company or if they involve a big name brand person, which I think is just so telling of who they consider their actual customers.
You don't want to piss off your big advertisers.
It's not your users who are there for free, but it's your advertisers who pay you money, and then famous people also. That's what it seems like anyway. So I was wondering if you could like maybe give us like a few examples of the kinds of scams we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you use social media and you have managed to avoid seeing an Elon Musk wants to give you money post, I salute you. Internally, yes, in terms of like what the company was worried about, guidance from management was that, the two biggest concerns were things that would piss off advertisers and things that would piss off really high profile public figures. And that was due to both revenue and, PR fire risk. Does anyone outside the company use the phrase PR fire? Like, is that, or have I just kind of internalized that over the last years?
PR fire. I mean, I get it.
Yeah.
But
okay. Yeah. It's just, I just think of like, oh man, that's a PR fire, and that's like largely based on reading many documents.
Jeff, you are a walking PR fire for Facebook. But I want to. On that subject, do you think that what we're seeing here in terms of like this, you can almost call it libertarian laissez-faire, let the people be scammed and it's on them if they get scammed. Is that sort of a piece with Zuckerberg's move to the right, or does it predate that?
I would say it mostly predates that. I think that, look, the move to the right was kind of billed as, sort of some abrupt shift for Mark. I think there's long been a sense that, Mark is focused on what's good for the company and on winning. He never liked content moderation because content moderation is expensive, burdensome, and, not something that can be scaled as easily as, a machine learning based recommendation system. And so I think there maybe is a little more permission at this point to be open about these things. And certainly, as you noted, there was a bit of positioning toward the, masculine energy, I think was the phrase he used. This is not new. I mean, in 2023 and 2024, the company was, if anything, less concerned about scam activity on its platforms. It really was the arrival of regulators, both around the world and sort of getting more and more upset about these things that did lead to the company starting to think about how it might want to maybe put scam revenue on a glide path, not cut it out hard.
Thank you, Keir Starmer. He's actually achieved something. Good for him.
Do you have a sense for which of Meta's platforms has which is the most popular with scammers? Is it Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp?
Facebook is still where most of the money comes from. And yeah, I mean, it's look, I understand that among coastal media types, the idea of spending an hour on Facebook Reels is pretty daunting, but it is not that way in much of the world, and that's where most of the money is coming from.
Wow. And do you have a sense for how much people wind up spending on these scams year to year?
So in terms of losses, I mean, there's the very obvious math of running a scam is a business. Depending, you either have to, value your own time or value the time of your, and this is nightmarish, your human trafficked employees on the Cambodian-Myanmar border in a scam compound. You have to buy the ads, you have to figure out how to launder some money. These are all cost things. So you'd assume that if Meta is doing $3.5 billion of just higher legal risk scam ads, that the losses would have to be a multiple of that for users. And so the victims range from for who gave $19.95 to an entity that was saying it was McCormick and Schmick, or McCormick for a spice rack.
That one looked tempting, I'll be honest. I saw it in your story.
I mean, if your spice rack will never arrive, but your credit card will be shared widely once that happens. So it ranges from kind of little e-com scam stuff to ads for investments in which people have lost their whole damn life savings. So it is
the Canadian Monty story. Can you tell that one?
That
was so sad.
Yes. Now this was an organic scam, which means that an ad wasn't involved. That's the internal Meta terminology for it. But there are plenty of investment ads that are getting run too, where people will, it looks like a investment firm from, that's based in New York or London, and they get you to deposit money, and they show that you're making amazing profits real fast, and then you deposit more money, and soon you're hundreds of thousands of dollars in. So this does happen, and people truly lose their life savings on this stuff.
Is this pig butchering?
Pig butchering, I think, almost has that romance scam connotation sometimes, but the whole concept of it is that you're fattening up the pig, right? As in building trust, and and then at some point you butcher them. So yeah, this is a variation on that, and I mean, it's obviously something that you don't have to have it work out that much if when it does work out, you're making six figures in profit. So the losses here are like can be pretty devastating.
And the losses, I mean, obviously, most of Facebook's user base is not in the US or even North America, but this is where the money is. Like, do you have a feel for like, are the losses over what, like, disproportionately American?
It's disproportionately affluent country. A lot of this is cross-border, and there is, like I referenced the scam compounds in Southeast Asia. This is sort of the confluence of crypto, which makes money laundering much easier and makes it much harder to recover funds once you realize you've been had. Plus the rise of organized crime that is really focused on like these sorts of scams. Plus Gen AI making it much easier to, take someone who was trafficked from Kenya and is now like in Cambodia, and to have them talk to someone who lives in Texas and pretend to be someone who's in New York.
Can these people file lawsuits against Meta? Like, why isn't there no class action or anything, or maybe there is?
There are a few class actions, and there is some litigation here. That said, it's been very hard. Section 230, which we've all talked about at various points, which gives platforms legal defenses against like allegations that they failed to moderate content. That does apply to some degree here. I think for a lot of folks, they're like, wait a second, if you're taking money to let someone advertise, there's a higher standard of responsibility. That just feels right to a lot of people, I think. How that's going to hold up in court is an interesting question. But there are a couple different. There's both the class actions you mentioned, and then there's also instances in which extremely pissed off billionaires who dislike that people are being regularly defrauded in their name and having their likeness, like sort of used by the scammers. They have sued Meta as well. There's both a case in Japan and then I think the one that has gotten furthest in the U.S. court system came from Dr. Andrew Forrest, who is an Australian mining magnate / philanthropist, and who I think just like got extremely upset on a personal level that like thousands upon thousands of scam ads were being run in his name, and at this point is sort of going at this thing in a rather aggressive and personal fashion, we'll say.
Go, Andrew. Andrew Forrest is to Mark Zuckerberg as Peter Thiel is to Nick Denton. But I do want to stick on this subject of massive losses and billionaires, because we do need to cover the FT story about NEOM, which was just amazing and delicious. And if you think that losing hundreds of thousands of dollars on like some Facebook scam is bad, just imagine what it would feel like to lose $50 billion on building a hole in the ground in the middle of the desert.
The FT story is amazing, but it's all in meters. And, my pedestrian
yeah, what is 500
American
meters
brain,
in
I'm like,
feet,
what?
Emily? It's like, so 500 meters just is what, like 1,600 feet, something like that?
It's about as high as the Empire State Building, this structure, NEOM, and then as long as 100-ish miles long.
It's long enough, and this is in the FT article, it's long enough to reach from London all the way to France.
To be clear, it doesn't exist. That's
it doesn't
the plan.
exist, but this is the thing that MBS wanted to build in the middle of the desert. Was basically a solid wall, 100 miles long, more than 100 miles long, I think, which was 1,600 feet high, taller than the Empire State Building, would have like inverted dangly skyscrapers as part of it. I love that bit where they were talking like we had hundreds of meetings about birds because the birds would just constantly. It was in the middle of like a major migration line, and like the birds would just be crashing into the sides of this wall, and they
like, "We'll just
couldn't
put
go around it
stickers
because
on
it's
the
hundreds of
windows."
miles long. And they can't go over it because it's 1,600 feet high.
But birds were going to run into it because it was going to be mirrored. Like it was going to be like worse than a window. And it was needed to be mirrored because otherwise the Saudi Arabian desert heat would like cook everything inside immediately.
For fire safety, they couldn't have like what you have in every other building, which is if there's a fire, evacuate the building because you'd just be evacuated into the middle of the desert where it's 140 degrees outside. So all they can do is say, well, evacuate to next door and hope the fire doesn't follow you.
What's remarkable about this to me is it's sort of like it's so sci-fi-ish, but not grounded in reality in such an extreme way. It's like if you asked a 14-year-old who is a sci-fi fan to imagine a city of the future, who had no understanding of structural engineering, no concept of scale, and just came up with all the craziest shit they could think of, this is what you would end up with.
There's so much crazy that they are still, I mean, the Winter Olympics is going to be in the middle of the desert in 2029. They're still building like a winter ski slope in.
Well, there was also this detail about, they had the government basically raised a nearby small town, and there were people who protested, and most of them ended up in prison, and 3 of them ended up executed.
Shot. Yeah.
So against the backdrop of that, which 9 million people in any part of the world would find it attractive to move there and live in this crazy, possibly structurally unsound city?
But the crazy thing is that like, for all like there was this wonderful video that the FT people found where like the people in charge of it were saying, yeah, it's not so much about engineering and it's more about poetry. Like we need more poets. And you're like,
really didn't
no,
understand
you really need more engineers. But they
if
wound
I'm
up
going
building
into an upside down building that's dangling from, a bridge, I care more about the engineering than the poetry.
That was so great. That wonderful bit where they were like, well, the problem is that all of the toilets, when you flush, like all of that waste goes down. It doesn't go up. So what's going to happen to all of like the waste? And they were like, oh, we have it all worked out. We're going to have like these shuttles running 24/7 that like are shuttling the like. It was absolutely batshit. But the amazing thing about it is that even though it was absolutely batshit, they still spent $50 billion on it, and they're the largest piles in the world, just massive pieces of concrete sitting in the desert being follies that cost billions and billions of dollars. They actually started building this thing.
So I actually have a minor personal connection to this, which is a friend worked for a public planning firm. I mean, this thing was such a bonanza for consultants. A large portion of the money we're talking about for the planning stage of this just like went to a whole bunch of white collar people who were being told by their bosses that they needed to tell the Saudis what the Saudis wanted to hear. And so like I'd hear occasional updates from my buddy and he'd be like, yep, well, they just didn't really put in transit. So they're just going to have everyone fly around via drones. But like they're also going to use the drones so that they will like to hold up some extra moons just because they thought it'd be pretty cool to have 2 moons flying over. and there's going to be like kind of an electronic like sea monster in one of the harbors.
What?
Like I just like
again, this is like a child comes up with,
I would just hear stuff like this all the time. I'd be like, wow, that's incredible. And like, everyone knew this was like not going to happen. And again, like Elizabeth, like, you have children. Like this is like you're like, oh, isn't that nice, honey? Right? Like is sometimes what you say. And like, it was like basically that level. And like my buddy is a smart person, did not expect this was going to happen. But like was just kind of like, yeah, this is like weirdly what we are being hired to do. And I think the fascinating thing is like, even as the FT and, the NEOM is like kind of done, and Elliot Brown, shout out to Elliot Brown, my colleague, former colleague at the Wall Street Journal, who wrote a lot about this stuff and its failures previous to this as well. Like even as that's happening, they're also talking about building a World Cup stadium on top of a skyscraper. Like that's like the new version of it. Like which is like another version of you're like, wow, that's a terrible idea. Like what like structurally
Let's get
I'm not
100,000 people into a stadium 1,600 feet above ground, where they all need to go up and down in elevators because reasons.
like I'm not an engineer, and evidently neither was anyone involved in this project.
Well, it's so amazing because, there's all this talk now about the abundance agenda, and there should be less barriers in place to building, and that's America's whole problem. And we have this president now who's just like, oh, I don't need to ask for permission. I'm just going to knock down a building and build whatever I feel like, and everyone seems okay with it or whatever. And then you have MBS out there in Saudi Arabia, and he's like, we want to build this crazy structure, and who cares about the birds, and there's toilets to whatever. And they had the FT story has meetings where he would come in with like an entourage of like 50 people. He'd walk around, total silence, and he'd say something, point to something he liked, and they'd all go, love it. Like there is a reason you can't just like fully, you need some kind of someone saying no sometimes. Like that does actually make sense a little bit.
Officially, this is still on. Like no one has really worked out how to let MBS down gently on this one and be like, But like,
well, if
the initial plan went from like
consequences are. So.
The initial plan went from like we're going to build 20 of these sections to 7 to 4 to 3 to like maybe 1. And then, but it doesn't work if there's only one for a whole bunch of like logistical reasons. And so obviously nothing's going to wind up getting built, partly because the amount of steel you would need is like the entire annual production of steel. And there's no way of physically getting it into the middle of the desert. There's just like one tiny little port somewhere that just doesn't have that capacity. None of this makes any sense.
Well, I thought about that too. And I know I just had a whole thing about you can't just have one guy have a crazy dream and then everyone, surrounded by yes men and it happens. But like, how do great buildings get built? Like, this is maybe my dumbest hot take ever, but like, the pyramids happened. Like, sometimes crazy things happen because someone has a dream.
What I will say is that we should all go back, because we have a bunch of archives here at Slate Money, and we should all go back and listen to the great Slate Money Goes to the Movies episode with Michael Beirut about The Fountainhead, because that is very apropos. And that is an awesome movie, I have to say. For all that it was written by Ayn Rand, and she wasn't allowed, according to her like contract, they weren't allowed to change a single word. And so there's this crazy long monologue at the end that goes on forever. But that movie, it's Gary Cooper, right? And it's such a great movie. And that's how buildings get built. That's a documentary, Emily.
Wasn't he trying to build really cool looking gas stations and motels? Is that something else? Have I got it all screwed up in my head?
Yeah, you've got it all screwed up. He was building modernist skyscrapers.
Right, modernist skyscrapers. Yeah, that's what I mean. You got to have a vision, one guy with a dream who seems crazy and, takes it to extremes, but then in the end everyone celebrates the beautiful.
To me it sounds a little
result.
bit more, it reminds me of there's a bit in Thank You for Smoking where some Hollywood guy comes up with an idea for a movie and he wants people smoking in space, and somebody points out that you don't want to do that in a high oxygen environment or everything will explode. And the agent says, oh, well, we always have a solution for that. Whenever you have some unrealistic, unworkable idea, you just say, oh, well, thank God we invented the machine that prevents these things from exploding. And then people just will the machine into reality. And that sounds like that's what's happening here. They discover a blindingly obvious problem, and then engineers have to scramble or designers have to scramble and just come up with some equally preposterous solution to it. And then that just gets built into the plan.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost literally that there's this joke in architecture circles that like if you don't know how to support something, you just put in a sky hook. You just like dangle it from the sky. And then you kind of use the sky hook as the design solution until such point as you work out what like the actual real solution is going to be. But this entire city was basically suspended from sky hooks. It was all just this flight of fancy, and it was all just the creature of this one, millennial prince who has more money and power than like probably anyone else on the planet.
Would
And
you
he
even
likes
want to live
dismember
there?
his critics, too.
Yeah,
Would you
I
even
was going
want
to
to
say,
live in a
Felix, would you say
wall?
that if you were in Riyadh right now? I don't think you would, Felix.
You'd say, love it.
If I was
Love it.
commissioned to
I
if
love
I was
it.
commissioned to
Love
do a
it.
comedy show in Riyadh, that would be like a bit that I might choose not to say. But let's do the numbers round. Elizabeth, you have a number?
I do. It's 10, and that's dollars. And that is the amount of money that a caller into a radio show called Manny and Lauren's Morning Show said that she was going to charge all of her Thanksgiving dinner participants in order to subsidize the cost of Thanksgiving dinner. And this generated a huge debate about whether this was reasonable. But it sort of also got put into a Yahoo News story about the cheapest things people did to save money. And then I just went down the rabbit hole of crazy things people did to save money. And they included somebody's roommate who counted sheets of paper towels to make sure that none of the other roommates were using too many. Someone who reused Q-tips. And a guy who would go on vacation, buy a canoe, use the canoe, and then return it on the way back.
Oh, I see. Like you buy the canoe and then you get a refund on your canoe. I like that. I'm pro that. My number is 32 million, which is the lower end of the number of dollars that was being made per year by a guy called Rob Dyrdek. Do any of you guys know who Rob Dyrdek is?
No.
Rob Dyrdek is the host of a show on MTV called Ridiculousness, which was apparently responsible for like the majority of the linear programming on MTV for the past few years. It has more than 1,700 episodes. It's one of the longest running series in MTV history. It ran for 14 years and they were paying the host $32 million a year plus.
That's a lot of money.
It's just like a clip show of people falling over. I don't know, man. But anyway, they've cancelled it now. But they have an archive of 1,700 like previous shows, and I don't think there's anything new in any of them, so they can just keep on running reruns in perpetuity, should they so desire.
I feel like it's in the Jackass genre of TV shows.
Yeah, it's definitely in the Jackass genre. Emily, what's your number?
My number is 2.6 million. That is the number of people who will get no money in SNAP benefits in November under this new calculation the White House put out this week. I've been following this very closely, and you'll forgive me if I just explain it a little, even though maybe it's a bummer.
Yeah, Debbie Downer.
Sorry. The government is shut down. It's the longest shutdown ever. And because of this, the White House said it can't pay these food stamp benefits, even though in other shutdowns they've been paid. It's no problem, even though in the appropriations that sets up SNAP, there is a contingency fund there specifically for the purpose of in case something goes wrong, there's more money to send out. There is money there. Trump administration said, no, we can't do it. Cities, states, nonprofits, they all sued. They said, there's money there. Like, just give out the money. And the White House said, we can't. We are law abiding and we can't. So they went to the court. Two different courts were like, there's money there. Pay the money. You can do it. And they were like, oh, well, there is a little money. We'll pay partial benefits. So instead of just like sending out the money as they normally do, they're like, each state needs to calculate these partial benefits. So they made up this calculation, and this wonderful policy analyst at the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities looked at it, did the math, was like, they're not even spending the amount they said they would spend. And the USDA was like, oh, we made a mistake, we made an error. And they told the court, like, we have a better calculation. So even under the better calculation that the USDA came up with, there are still 2.6 million individuals who under this new calculation get absolutely nothing because of the way they're mathing the math. But now we are recording on November 7th, so no new benefits have gone out now for 7 days. There's lines at food banks and food pantries around the country. The Times had a good piece on Friday where they talked to a bunch of people who get SNAP. Some of them are like dumpster diving. Other people are, asking their friends for food or like stretching out their food and their meals. A court again said, by Friday, please send out the money. And the White House was like, no, they have appealed that order. So that's what's happening. I just thought people would be interested in that.
But we have a $350 million ballroom, Emily.
Yes. Oh, and I should say, to be fair, the White House, their response to this is that if Democrats would and the shutdown that they could send out the money.
Politics. Jeff, tell me your number isn't political.
I'll just stick with meta numbers, and it's going to be I'm going to go with a percentile, and that's 70%, and that is the percentage of advertisers in their first week on the platform that are violating Meta's rules. The reason that number is so high is because advertisers who get kicked off can just come right back on under a new account. And so therefore, like, most Facebook advertising in its first week is like illegitimate, which I thought is just kind of a fascinating statistic.
Yeah, I mean, but here we are in 2025. Like, if you're an advertiser who has never advertised on Facebook, you're a weird company just to begin with.
Or you are an entity that was kicked off last week and will be kicked off again this week and will join the platform again next week.
I like the idea that there are sort of scam probability percentage consultants who are like, this is how you tweak your ad so it's only 94% likely to be a scam rather than 96% likely to be a scam, and that way it'll stay up.
I mean, it's not that precise. These accounts you can throw them away pretty quickly. So like, it's more like, we've got like 300 to 400 accounts. Like, let's see what works. Because everyone's doing A/B testing, right? Meta's doing A/B testing, and the scammers are doing A/B testing. So like, does this get us kicked off? If not, keep doing it.
On which note, I think that's it for us this week. Thank you to Jessamine Molly and Shana Roth for producing. Thank you to Micah Phillips for making sure that we can all be on the YouTubes, which is very exciting. Thank you, everyone, for writing in, slatemoney@slate.com. But thank you mostly to Jeff Horwitz, who got up at the crack of a sparrow's fart to be on this show all the way out there in California. Thank you, Jeff, for being on. It's been great having you.
The crack
It's been a pleasure.
Are we just going to let that go?
The sparrow's fart thing, it was weird. I didn't
just
love
let
it
go.
either.
British
but-
is-
You know what? Just
Yeah. No. Yeah.
We will be back next week with even more Slate Money. And remember to check out the Slatest, Slate's daily newsletter. It's your daily update on the most urgent, surprising, and unusual news delivered straight to your inbox. A special thanks to all our Slate Plus members. If you haven't already, consider joining. Slate Plus members get unlimited access to all of Slate's journalism, plus they get ad-free podcasts, and they help support our independent reporting.